Imagine, if you would, finding a Brazilian football fan walking out of the stadium in Yokohama, Japan, back in 2002.
Oh man, what a time.
Right. Like, they've just watched Ronaldo, Rivaldo, and Ronaldinho, the legendary three Rs, just completely dominate and lift the World Cup trophy.
They're on top of the world.
Exactly. They are on top of the world. Now, imagine walking up to that fan and telling them two things. First, that their country will not win another World Cup for at least a quarter of a century.
I mean, they'd laugh in your face.
They would.
Yeah.
But then imagine telling them that 24 years later, the ultimate savior called upon to rescue their sacred footballing soul wouldn't be, a kid from the favelas or some legendary domestic coach. It would be a 66-year-old Italian man.
Yeah, they would probably think you were describing some sort of dystopian alternate reality.
Completely insane to them.
Because for a nation that essentially views this sport as a deeply protected domestic religion, bringing in a foreign manager is historically unthinkable. It goes against literally every tenet of their footballing philosophy.
And yet here we are. This is exactly what we are unpacking in our deep dive today. We are looking at one of the most unprecedented cultural and tactical shifts in the history of international sports. Carlo Ancelotti taking the reins of the Brazilian national team for the 2026 World Cup.
It's massive.
It really is. And based on the extensive tactical blueprints, roster breakdowns, and historical analyses we have in front of us, we have to settle this massive debate.
Right.
Does bringing in arguably the most successful European club manager in history actually strengthen Brazil's national footballing identity by modernizing it? Or does it fundamentally undermine the pride and the century-old tradition of the five-time world champions?
Well, it's an incredibly polarizing move. You have to understand that we aren't just analyzing a coaching appointment here. We are dissecting a massive cultural collision.
A total clash of worlds.
Exactly. On one side, you have the historical weight of Jogo Bonito, right? The beautiful game. It's a philosophy that demands flair, spontaneous joy, and a relentless commitment to attacking aesthetics.
It has to look good.
It has to be art. But on the opposing side, Ancelotti represents European pragmatism, that cold, calculating, highly structured discipline required to navigate modern, high-stakes tournament football. So the Brazilian Football Confederation, the CBF, they aren't just trying to win a trophy. They're attempting to surgically fuse two completely opposing footballing ideologies.
But to figure out why they would take such a massive risk, why they'd break a taboo that has stood for over 100 years, we have to start with the trauma.
The 24-year curse.
Yeah, we have to look at the curse. Because an entire generation of Brazilians has grown up, gone to school, started careers, had kids of their own without ever seeing their country win a World Cup.
Which is wild to think about.
Right. For a nation that genuinely views that gold trophy as a birthright, this isn't just a drought, it's a creeping, agonizing national crisis.
It's a profound psychological paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
And the data from our sources reveals a very clear, very methodical pattern to this trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just the fact that Brazil has been losing. It is precisely how and who they have been losing to.
The European wall.
Yes, they have hit a European wall. It's this psychological and tactical barrier that's been constructed, tournament by highly structured European opposition.
The timeline of these knockout stage exits in the notes is just brutal to read. It feels less like a series of football matches and more like a recurring nightmare.
Well, let's trace the architecture of that wall, right? In 2006, they arrive in Germany with a staggeringly talented squad. But in the quarterfinals, they face France.
Oh, that game.
And Zidane doesn't just beat them. He puts on a masterclass in spatial manipulation. He completely controls the tempo of the midfield, exploiting the gaps behind the Brazilian attackers who they simply refuse to track back.
Yeah, France's structure outsmarted Brazil's individual brilliance.
Exactly. Then move to 2010, quarterfinals again. This time it's the Netherlands.
Right, and the exact same thing happens. You watch that game, and Wesley Sneijder is just pulling the strings. The Dutch had this incredibly disciplined, rigid structure that completely neutralized the individual flair of the Brazilian forwards.
It was like watching water hit concrete.
Totally. And that inability to break down concrete leads us to the ultimate humiliation. 2014.
It's a 7-1.
Yeah, against Germany. On home soil in Brazil in the semifinals, I don't think there is a more shocking scoreline in the history of the sport.
Oh, definitely not.
But reading through the tactical breakdown, what strikes me isn't just the sheer number of goals, it's the emotional collapse.
The complete loss of shape.
Yeah. It wasn't a team getting beaten. It was a clinical, systematic dissection of a group of players who had completely lost their tactical shape. The moment Germany applied structured pressure, the Brazilian players just abandoned their zones.
They started chasing the ball like children on a playground.
Exactly, completely consumed by the anxiety of the moment.
And that emotional unraveling is the core issue here. And it didn't stop in 2014. In 2018, they faced Belgium in the quarterfinals. Kevin De Bruyne and Roberto Martinez designed a highly specific tactical trap.
Bypassing the midfield.
Right, they bypassed the Brazilian midfield entirely with structured vertical counterattacks. Brazil gets outmaneuvered. And finally, in 2022 against Croatia.
Another quarterfinal.
Another deeply disciplined, structured European midfield that forces the game into a penalty shootout where Brazil's nerve fails again.
So the pattern is just undeniable.
Undeniable. Brazil dominates the world in sheer individual improvisational talent, but the moment they face a rigid European structure, they just get unraveled.
You know, reading through these tactical autopsies, it makes me think of a magician who has this one spectacular, world-famous magic trick, and for decades it blew everyone's minds.
Right.
But you keep performing the same trick, and eventually the audience, in this case, these elite European teams, figures out the illusion. They know exactly where the trap door is.
Yeah, they see the wires.
Exactly. They aren't mesmerized by the fancy footwork anymore. They just sit back, wait for the magician to make a slight error, and then they completely expose the act.
That's a great way to put it.
Which makes me wonder, is that 7-1 against Germany just a horrific memory, or is it a foundational, permanent psychological scar? Because it seems like the moment this team experiences even an ounce of adversity against a European team, they just mentally disintegrate.
Well, the historical evidence in our sources suggests it is absolutely a foundational scar. The breakdown details this psychological phenomenon very clearly. When Brazil faces a European powerhouse in a knockout game, their historical tendency over the last 20 years is that the moment they go down a goal, their tactical discipline just evaporates.
They panic.
They panic. Instead of trusting a system, they start playing with this overwhelming, suffocating anxiety. They abandon any semblance of defensive shape and try to rely on pure, desperate individual brilliance to save them.
And the European teams know exactly how to handle that.
Right. Modern European defensive structures, like the ones deployed by France, Germany, or Croatia, are specifically engineered to trap, absorb, and destroy that exact kind of unstructured, desperate attacking.
So the CBF looks at this 24-year nightmare. They look at the European wall, and they realize the magician needs a completely new act.
Yes.
Which forces them to do the unthinkable, looking outside their own borders for a manager. And this is where the identity debate really explodes for you and anyone watching. Because for over a century, the unwritten law of Brazilian football was that you only hire domestic managers.
It was a point of immense, unwavering national pride. To hire a foreigner was widely considered an outright admission of tactical inferiority.
Wow.
It was basically tantamount to standing up on the global stage and saying, we, the nation that essentially defined how the sport is played creatively, no longer possess the footballing intelligence to fix our own problems.
That is a staggering admission of vulnerability. And I look at this debate and I completely understand the purists who are furious about this.
It hurts.
It does. Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy. Imagine a legendary, generations-old family pizzeria in Naples. They've been making the same incredible pizza for 100 years. It's their identity.
Okay, I follow you.
But suddenly, the local critics start pointing out that the crust is a little inconsistent, the competitors up in Milan are using better ovens, and they are losing market share. So the family panics. They bring in a French Michelin star chef to completely overhaul their dough recipe.
Right.
Now, even if the new pizza tastes objectively better, even if they win awards, is it still their family's authentic pizza? Or did they just sell their soul to get the Michelin star? If Ancelotti wins the 6th star, does it have an asterisk next to it?
That is exactly the profound anxiety encapsulated by those opposed to the move. Does a foreign manager fundamentally damage the domestic pride of a nation that historically dominated the sport on its own terms?
Such a huge question.
But if we look at the other side of the argument, the pragmatic side, the counter-argument from the sources is brutal but necessary. If that family pizzeria in Naples refuses to adapt, it goes out of business entirely and the recipe dies anyway.
The classic adapt or die reality of modern football.
Exactly.
Eh.
The pragmatic view argues that domestic Brazilian tactics have become deeply insular. They were romantically attached to a style of play that simply no longer works against modern, data-driven, highly organized European defensive structures.
Right.
So in this view, Ancelotti isn't destroying Brazilian identity. He is providing the exact tactical modernism required to actually unlock the immense potential of this current generation of players. It is an evolution, not an erasure.
Okay, but if they were going to bring in a European to modernize the tactics, why Carlo Ancelotti specifically? I mean, there are other brilliant tactical minds out there. You have Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp, Mikel Arteta.
Right.
But the sources point out that hiring someone like Guardiola would have actually been a disaster for Brazil.
A total disaster.
Right.
Because the modern landscape of elite football is dominated by tactical ideologues. Managers like Guardiola or Klopp are brilliant, yes, but they force their players into highly complex, predefined systems.
They micromanage everything.
Right. Guardiola's positional play requires players to memorize automatisms, to stand on very specific blades of grass, creating complex geometric passing networks. If the CBF had hired an ideologue to manage Brazilian street footballers, the clash of cultures would have been violent.
The players would have felt suffocated.
Completely.
Yeah, you can't tell a player whose entire game is built on spontaneous rhythm that they aren't allowed to dribble outside of their designated quadrant. They would absolutely revolt.
But Carlo Ancelotti is the antithesis of the rigid ideologue. The tactical breakdowns refer to him as the chameleon.
The chameleon, I love that.
His greatest strengths aren't found in drawing complex geometric shapes on a whiteboard. His genius lies in elite man management and unparalleled emotional intelligence. He does not overcomplicate the game.
So he adapts to what he has.
Exactly. He assesses the natural characteristics of the squad he inherits, and he molds the tactical system to fit the players, not the other way around.
Which is how he manages to walk this incredibly fine line. He's trying to balance the cultural demand for jogo bonito, the flair, the dribbling, the joy, with a very harsh dose of European realism.
And that realism comes with a brutal truth that Ancelotti has explicitly stated in our sources. And it's something that really challenges the core of Brazilian football romanticism. He basically says, no team wins a World Cup by just being pretty. They win by surviving moments of extreme suffering during a match.
Man, I read that quote in the notes and it just stopped me in my tracks. Surviving moments of extreme suffering. It sounds so dramatic, but it directly attacks the Brazilian mindset of just, dancing your way out of a problem.
Exactly.
He is telling them, you are going to get trapped, you are going to get outplayed for 20-minute stretches, and you have to learn how to exist in that misery without panicking.
It requires a fundamental rewiring of their defensive mindset. Ancelotti is introducing structured defensive shifting and transitional tracking.
Which means what exactly on the pitch?
This means that when a Brazilian attacker loses the ball, they don't just throw their hands up in frustration. They immediately sprint back to cover a zone. He wants them to be entirely comfortable suffering without the ball, absorbing pressure in a rigid shape so they can launch lethal, direct counterattacks.
Oh.
It is a pragmatic willingness to embrace the ugly side of the game.
So European realism is the bitter medicine meant to cure the 24-year curse.
Right.
But what makes this experiment so fascinating is that Ancelotti isn't walking into this locker room as a complete stranger trying to sell a foreign philosophy from scratch. He actually has a massive built-in head start because of his day job at Real Madrid.
It is perhaps the single most critical factor in this appointment. Managing a national team is notoriously difficult because you only get the players for a few weeks a year. You barely have time to install a basic system, let alone build deep psychological chemistry.
Right, it's just in and out.
But Ancelotti has spent years at Real Madrid intensely developing the two most important focal points of Brazil's attack, Vinícius Júnior and the 19-year-old prodigy, Endrick.
So he already knows exactly what makes them tick.
Exactly.
He doesn't need to spend the first 6 months figuring out how they respond to criticism or what their preferred movement patterns are. He possesses the cheat codes to their psychology.
He knows their triggers. He knows how to maximize their output. And crucially, they inherently trust him. I mean, they have won Champions League titles for him.
That's huge.
That pre-existing respect bypasses the usual honeymoon phase and allows him to implement his tactical shifts immediately. And while that attacking chemistry is built in, the most radical shift Ancelotti is making, the one that truly signals the arrival of European realism, is happening in the defense.
Yeah, this was the part of the tactical breakdown that genuinely shocked me. Because when you think of Brazilian football, the fullback is arguably the most iconic, romanticized position on the pitch.
Oh, without a doubt.
You think of Cafu bombing down the right flank for 90 minutes. You think of Roberto Carlos bending the laws of physics with his left foot. Or Donny Alves essentially playing as a second winger, spending 80% of the match inside the opponent's penalty box. The attacking fullback is Brazilian heritage. And Ancelotti is he's just killing it.
He is functionally retiring that archetype for this tournament.
Mhm.
Under his European blueprint, the hyper-offensive fullback is a liability.
Really a liability.
Yes, because it leaves too much space exposed behind them, which is exactly how teams like Belgium and Croatia have been destroying Brazil on the counterattack. So Ancelotti is prioritizing deeply conservative profiles. He has selected Danilo from Juventus and Alexandro from Flamengo.
Right, guys who are essentially center backs playing out wide. But how does that actually work mechanically? If they aren't overlapping the wingers and crossing the ball, what is their function during a Brazilian attack?
The tactical shift relies on creating an asymmetrical rest defense.
Okay, break that down for us.
During possession, instead of both Danilo and Alexandro flying forward to join the attack, they're instructed to tuck inside. They invert into the half spaces and form a temporary back three with the remaining center backs. Or they step up slightly to sit right alongside the defensive midfielder.
Ah, so they are physically choking the counter-attacking lanes.
Mathematically, yes. By tucking inside, they occupy the exact spaces that European teams want to counter into. If Brazil loses the ball high up the pitch, there are instantly 4 or 5 players forming a physical wall in the center of the park.
Oh, wow.
It's a purely preventative measure. Now, the roster does include Wesley from Flamengo, who possesses that traditional raw, explosive Brazilian pace down the flank, but his inclusion is highly situational.
So he's not the primary plan.
No. He is an emergency option if Brazil is down a goal in the 80th minute and needs to artificially stretch the pitch. But the default setting is absolute defensive solidity.
Okay, so the flanks are locked down. But if you are building this impenetrable European spine, who are the pillars in the center? Because if they are absorbing all this pressure, the center backs have to be flawless.
The starting partnership is a brilliant fusion of 2 very different defensive profiles. On one side, you have Marquinhos from Paris Saint-Germain. He is the brain of the operation.
Right.
He provides elite game-reading ability, immense spatial awareness, and he carries the crucial dressing room leadership. He organizes the line.
If Marquinhos is the brain, then I'm assuming Ancelotti needs pure brawn next to him, someone who isn't afraid to get into an absolute dogfight with a physical European striker.
Which is precisely why Gabriel Magalhães from Arsenal is his partner. Gabriel brings something that historically Brazilian defenses have sometimes lacked. Raw, unadulterated aggression, and absolute aerial dominance.
From playing in England.
Yes, he has been forged in the intensely physical environment of the English Premier League. He wins the ugly headers, he dominates the physical duels, and he is terrifying on set pieces. It's the perfect blend of Marquinhos' intelligence and Gabriel's brute force. And behind them, they have Bremer from Juventus.
Bremer is an interesting piece because he has ridiculous recovery pace for a center back.
His pace is vital. If Ancelotti decides a specific matchup requires a permanent 3-man backline, Bremer's speed allows them to play a higher defensive line without the fear of being exposed by balls played over the top.
Man, that defense sounds terrifying to play against. But the most luxurious problem Ancelotti has, what the sources are literally calling the greatest headache in international football, is the situation in goal.
Yes.
It's not often you have 2 of the top 5 goalkeepers on the planet in the exact same squad.
Alisson Becker versus Ederson. It's a phenomenal dilemma.
So, Alisson from Liverpool has been the traditional number 1. He started the last 2 World Cups, and you completely understand why. The guy's pure shot-stopping ability is peerless. His calmness in a one-on-one situation is like he has ice in his veins. If a striker's running clear at goal, you want Alisson in net. But then you have Ederson at Fenerbahce. And reading through the tactical notes, there is a very specific mechanic in Ancelotti's system that might actually push Ederson into the starting role.
It all comes back to Ancelotti's reliance on the transitional counterattack. We have to stop viewing Ederson simply as a goalkeeper. In possession, Ederson operates as a deep-lying playmaker.
Right.
He possesses arguably the greatest, most accurate long-range ball distribution of any keeper in the history of the sport.
Right. He doesn't just punt the ball upfield and hope for a header. He throws 70-yard laser beams right onto the foot of a winger.
Exactly. Imagine a scenario where an opposing team commits bodies forward to press Brazil high up the pitch. If Alisson has the ball, he might look for a safe, short pass to build out of the back. But if Ederson has the ball, he can literally bypass the entire opposition midfield with one swing of his left boot.
That's incredible.
In a system designed to catch opponents off guard during transitions, Ederson dropping a 70-yard pass directly into the running path of Vinícius Júnior is a devastating, unplayable weapon. It perfectly accelerates Ancelotti's counterattacking philosophy.
And just to round out the goalkeeper room, the sources note that Waverton from Palmeiras is included, but his role seems to be less about minutes on the pitch and more about the psychological equilibrium of the squad.
Veteran leadership is essential. When you are forcing immensely talented, ego-driven players to adopt pragmatic, unglamorous tactical concepts, you need respected domestic voices in the locker room to keep the squad grounded and unified. Waverton provides that cultural glue.
Okay, so if the defense is the anchor of this new European realism, the tucked-in fullbacks, the aggressive center backs, the deep-lying playmaker in goal, the midfield and the attack are where the traditional Brazilian magic is supposed to happen.
Supposed to, yes.
But even that magic has to be tightly managed, so let's look at how Ancelotti has constructed the engine room.
The midfield under Ancelotti is an exercise in absolute balance. It is constructed with very specific, delineated roles designed to protect the defense while simultaneously feeding the explosive front line. And it all revolves around the anchor.
Casemiro, Manchester United?
Yes. Now, tactically, Casemiro is in the twilight of his career. He does not have the explosive recovery pace he had 5 years ago.
Right, he's slowed down a bit.
But his inclusion is non-negotiable for Ancelotti. Their relationship dates back to a wildly successful era together at Real Madrid. That deep, pre-existing trust is profound. Casemiro isn't just a player. He is the emotional and physical enforcer of Ancelotti's pragmatism on the pitch.
And his job description is essentially the dark arts of football.
His role is simple, brutal, and necessary. Destroy opposition attacks before they even begin. He is there to win the physical duels, protect Marquinhos and Gabriel Magalhães, and, perhaps most importantly, commit the necessary tactical fouls to break up an opponent's transition momentum. He is the shield.
But if Casemiro is just sitting deep and destroying, someone has to be doing the actual running to connect the defense to the attack. You need an engine.
Which brings us to Bruno Guimarães from Newcastle. He is the tactical connector.
Okay.
Guimarães has the physical stamina to press relentlessly for 90 minutes, but crucially, he also possesses the technical vision and the tight ball control to progress the play forward through highly congested areas. He is the bridge.
And he's got help, right?
Yes. To ensure the midfield isn't physically overrun, he will be partnered with either Fabinho or the emerging talent Danilo Santos from Nottingham Forest, forming a massive double pivot.
The idea being that this double pivot turns the center of the pitch into an absolute battleground. They want to make it physically agonizing for European teams to try and play through the middle.
Precisely. They are building a physical wall.
Yeah.
But that creates a problem. If your midfield is entirely focused on destruction and physical imposition, where does the creative spark come from? Who actually picks the final pass?
Right. That falls entirely on the shoulders of the creator, Lucas Paqueta from West Ham. And the tactical burden he carries in this system is just staggering. Because if you think about how opposition teams are going to defend against Brazil, their immediate priority is stopping the wingers. They are going to double team, maybe even triple team, the flanks.
Exactly. Opponents will naturally widen their defensive structures to deal with the threat out wide. And mathematically, if the opposition stretches their defense horizontally to cover the wings, it forces the center of the pitch to open up.
It creates these little pockets of vacuum in the middle.
Right. And Pekka has to be intelligent enough to constantly float into those exact pockets between the opposition's midfield and defensive lines. He has to receive the ball on the half turn under intense pressure and immediately possess the vision to slip a through ball to the forwards.
That's a lot of pressure.
If Paqueta gets tightly marked or has a poor game, the entire transition system stalls because the bridge between the physical double pivot and the attacking wingers is broken.
And the players he's trying to feed, I mean, when you read through the profiles of the explosive front line, the sheer attacking firepower is almost comical. It feels unfair to the rest of the world.
It is arguably the most lethal, youthful, and unpredictable attacking unit in global football. And the entire system is built to isolate them in one-on-one situations. It starts obviously on the left wing with Vinícius Júnior,
who isn't just a great player anymore. He enters this World Cup as a global icon, A perennial Ballon d'Or contender.
He is, at this current moment, the most devastating one-on-one winger in the world. His pace is terrifying, but it's his sheer unpredictability that breaks defenders.
Yeah, you never know what he's going to do.
He can beat you on the outside with pure speed, or he can cut inside onto his right foot and curl a shot into the far corner. Defenders simply do not know how to position themselves against him.
And the nightmare for the opposition is that while they are committing two defenders to try and survive Vinicius on the left, they are leaving themselves exposed on the opposite flank.
Where Rafinha from Barcelona is operating, Rafinha brings a completely different profile to the right wing. He isn't just about flashy dribbling. He offers an elite, relentless defensive work rate like he will actually track back and press.
Which fits Ancelotti's system perfectly.
Exactly. Offensively, he brings world-class crossing ability and a lethal left foot that he loves to use to cut inside and shoot.
And the depth is just absurd. Because let's say the opposition fullback somehow managed to survive 65 minutes of getting tortured by Vinicius and Rafinha. Their legs are turning to lead. They are mentally exhausted. What does Ancelotti do? He looks to his bench and brings on Gabriel Martinelli from Arsenal and Luis Enrique from Botafogo to run at them with completely fresh legs.
It is a deliberate strategy designed to physically and mentally exhaust the opponent's defensive wide players. But the true wild card of this entire roster, the player who completely alters the dynamic of any match he enters, is the prodigy, 19-year-old Endrick.
He is such a fascinating physiological study because he is universally viewed as the future of Brazilian football, but he isn't built like your traditional Suki Brazilian winger. He's not Neymar.
No. He is a completely different physical archetype. Endrick possesses a rare combination of immense lower body power, terrifying acceleration, and a truly ruthless, almost cynical finishing instinct inside the penalty box. He isn't out there to do step-overs. He is out there to strike the ball with lethal force.
He's built like a tank but runs like an Olympic sprinter. I'd imagine the temptation is to just start him every game, but the sources emphasize how carefully Ancelotti is managing him.
Well, throwing a 19-year-old into the starting lineup of a Brazilian World Cup squad is incredibly dangerous psychologically. The media pressure in Brazil is suffocating. Ancelotti's man management is crucial here.
So he's protecting him.
Yes. He is deliberately shielding Endrick, managing his minutes, and using him as an explosive impact substitute rather than burdening him with the expectation of carrying the nation from the first whistle.
Now, Ancelotti's hand was forced slightly in the attacking department due to some massive injuries prior to the tournament. They lost Richarlison, who was their leading goal scorer in Qatar, and they lost the young sensation Estevam,
which required Ancelotti to activate a pragmatic plan B. He selected Matthias Cunha from Wolves and Iker Thiago from Brentford. These players are not your stereotypical fluid Brazilian forwards. They are highly physical, structural target men.
which is such a European concept. Bring on the big guy to win the ugly balls.
Exactly. If Brazil is facing a team that is sitting incredibly deep and the intricate passing through Paqueta isn't working, Ancelotti now has the option to bypass the midfield entirely. He can bring on Thiago, play direct, physical, long ball football, and try to batter the defense into submission. It's not beautiful, but it wins matches.
Okay, so we've mapped out the tucked-in defense, the bruising midfield, and the flying wingers. But there is a massive, looming presence we have yet to discuss. You cannot possibly analyze the Brazilian national team in 2026 without dedicating a massive amount of time to the single biggest narrative storyline of the entire tournament, the Neymar redemption arc.
At 34 years old, having suffered catastrophic injuries, and currently playing his club football in Saudi Arabia for Al Hilal, this is indisputably Neymar da Silva Santos Jr.'s final dance on the world stage, and the emotional baggage he is carrying into this tournament is almost incomprehensible.
The sources frame it so poetically, the burden of Pele's shadow, because Neymar's entire adult life has been defined by the astronomical expectations of a nation that was desperate for a savior to cure the 24-year curse. And statistically speaking, he actually achieved the impossible. He officially surpassed Pele as Brazil's all-time leading goal scorer.
Which in a vacuum should elevate him to deity status.
No.
But football isn't played in a vacuum, and Brazilian football culture is ruthlessly demanding.
Because the purists don't care about the goal record. To them, he cannot truly sit at the table of the immortals. He cannot be spoken of in the same breath as Pelé, Ronaldo, or Romario until he lifts the gold trophy. Without a World Cup, they view his legacy as an incomplete, tragic tale of unfulfilled genius.
And that desperation historically led to a deeply flawed tactical approach. If we look back at the 2014, 2018, and 2022 World Cups, the entire tactical blueprint for Brazil was terrifyingly simplistic. Give the ball to Neymar and pray.
Basically.
He was the undisputed main man. Every single attack had to flow through his feet. Every ounce of creative pressure rested squarely on his shoulders.
Which ironically made them incredibly easy to defend against.
It made them utterly predictable. Elite European managers realized that if they just assigned 2 enforcers to physically batter Neymar for 90 minutes, the entire Brazilian system collapsed. It placed an incredibly unhealthy, unsustainable amount of pressure on one individual.
But that's changing now.
Yes. As the sources clearly delineate, Ancelotti has initiated a total paradigm shift. In 2026, this is no longer Neymar's team. This is undeniably, unequivocally, Vinícius Júnior's team.
So Neymar transitions from being the sole focal point to what the breakdowns call the ultimate luxury. But how exactly does a pragmatic manager like Ancelotti reinvent a 34-year-old superstar who, let's be honest, has lost that explosive 0 to 60 acceleration due to multiple knee and ankle reconstruction?
It requires a brilliant stroke of tactical reinvention. Ancelotti has absolutely no intention of deploying Neymar as a dynamic, touchline-hugging winger who has to sprint past fullbacks. His body simply cannot sustain that workload.
Right.
Instead, he plans to deploy Neymar centrally as an elite, deep-lying playmaker, essentially a classic number 10 or a false 9.
For those trying to visualize this on the pitch, let's break down the actual geometry of why a false 9 Neymar is such a dangerous weapon in this specific system.
Okay, picture the structural shape of the opponent's defense. Because opposition center backs are absolutely terrified of Vinícius Júnior's sheer pace running in behind them, they are forced to drop their defensive line incredibly deep toward their own penalty box. They have to give Vinny a 10-yard cushion just to survive.
Right, because if you try to play a high defensive line near midfield, Vinny just knocks the ball past you and wins the foot race every single time.
Exactly. And because the defense drops so deep to protect against the pace, but their midfield stays higher up the pitch to try and press Casemiro and Guimarães, it stretches the field vertically.
It creates a gap.
It naturally opens up massive pockets of empty space in the middle of the pitch, in that exact vacuum between the opponent's midfield and their defense.
And that is exactly where the false 9 operates.
Precisely. Neymar doesn't need to sprint past players anymore. He can leisurely drop into those empty pockets of space, receive the ball without being immediately hacked down, and operate purely on his exceptionally high football IQ and vision.
So he just pulls the strings from the middle.
Exactly. He can dictate the tempo, thread impossible through balls to Vini and Rafinha, and utilize his mastery of set pieces. He becomes Brazil's ultimate untouchable secret weapon.
It's a beautiful image. It's like having a chess grandmaster sitting calmly in the middle of an Olympic track meet. He just sits there and moves the pieces. This tournament is his final opportunity to shift his narrative from being a tragic figure to becoming an immortal Brazilian hero.
In theory, it is a flawless tactical adjustment.
Right, in theory. But I have to push back hard on this utopian vision, because this brings us to debate number 2 from our sources, and it's a massive red flag. When you look at how these specific superstars naturally move and operate instinctively on a football pitch, there is a severe risk of a massive tactical collision, the left half space collision.
You are referring to the spatial dilemma and the inherent ego clash.
Yes. Let's look at the reality of player instincts. Vinícius Júnior is technically a left winger, but his most dangerous move is not staying on the talk line and crossing. He inherently wants to cut inside onto his stronger right foot. He aggressively attacks the left half space, that specific channel between the wing and the center of the pitch.
Okay.
Now look at Neymar. Operating as a number 10, Neymar naturally drifts out of the crowded center and floats into that exact same left half space to receive the ball because it gives him a better angle to pass.
And suddenly, your 2 most important players are occupying the exact same 10 square yards of grass.
Exactly. And meanwhile, Paqueta needs the central area to create, and Endrick needs central service into the box to score. The geometry suddenly gets incredibly crowded. I have to ask, is there only one football for too many superstars who want to operate in the exact same zones? Can they actually coexist without literally running into each other and dragging defenders into each other's paths?
Well, it raises a profound tactical and psychological question. On a whiteboard in Ancelotti's office, the system perfectly spaces them out. But football is not played by robots on a whiteboard. It's played by human beings with deeply ingrained instincts and massive egos.
And those instincts take over when the pressure hits. Picture this scenario. We are in the World Cup quarterfinals. Brazil is playing a rigid, disciplined European team, let's say Germany or France. They go down 1-0 in the 65th minute. The pressure in the stadium is absolutely suffocating. The ghosts of 2006, 2010, 2014 are swirling.
The trauma is triggered.
Right. The trauma is triggered. Does this team truly trust Ancelotti's new system? Do they stay disciplined, maintain their spacing, trust Vinicius out wide, and patiently wait for the structural counterattack? Or do they panic? Do they revert to their 15-year-old habits, completely abandon their spacing, and just aggressively force the ball to a 34-year-old Neymar, begging him to perform a miracle?
That hypothetical scenario is the ultimate defining test of Ancelotti's chameleon management. Can his calm, gum-chewing, stoic sideline demeanor truly cure a deep 24-year-old national psychological trauma in the span of a few high-pressure weeks?
Right. Can he stop the panic?
Can he physiologically stop the panic before it takes root in the players' minds? Because if they revert to give the ball to Neymar and pray, they will abandon their shape, and those European structures will swallow them whole, exactly like they always do.
Man, the emotional and tactical stakes are just astronomically high. And the crazy thing is, the team doesn't get to ease into this. All this theory, the identity debate, the new defensive shape, it doesn't wait for the knockout stages to be tested. It gets put into the fire immediately. Let's look at the group stage, because the sources outline a deceptively complex Group C.
Yeah, Ancelotti will be forced to prove the validity of his pragmatic philosophy right out of the gate. Group C is not a walkover. He actually has to prepare 3 distinctly different tactical blueprints to survive 3 entirely different styles of football.
The opening test is June 13th in the New York, New Jersey Stadium. Brazil versus Morocco. And the tactical notes call this the undisputed blockbuster match of the group stages.
Morocco is an incredibly formidable opponent. We all remember their historic run in the 2022 Qatar World Cup, where they shocked the globe by finishing 4th, becoming the first African nation to ever reach the semifinals. They are battle-tested.
From a tactical standpoint, they present the exact kind of suffocating problem that Brazil historically despises playing against.
Yes, Morocco operates with a world-class, low defensive block. This means they are perfectly content to drop almost their entire team deep into their own half of the pitch. They remain incredibly compact, highly disciplined, and they are entirely comfortable surviving without possession of the ball for 90 straight minutes.
Just sitting back and absorbing.
They simply construct a wall and wait for the attacking team to become frustrated and impatient.
And they aren't just sitting there passively. They have the weapons to completely gut you the second you make a mistake.
Crucially, they possess players like Achraf Hakimi, who provides world-class recovery pace and devastating transition speed down the flank. The tactical danger for Brazil here is glaringly obvious. If they fall into their old habits of Jogo Bonito arrogance, if they pour too many bodies forward trying to force a beautiful goal through Morocco's wall, they will leave themselves completely mathematically exposed at the back.
The second a Brazilian midfielder misplaces a pass, Hakimi is just flying down the wing into acres of empty space.
Exactly. Morocco will launch lethal vertical counterattacks. Therefore, this opening match is the ultimate early litmus test. It will immediately demonstrate whether Ancelotti has successfully hardwired that European discipline into Brazil's defensive transition.
So we'll see if the fullbacks actually tuck in.
Will Danilo and Alexandra actually tuck inside to choke the counter? Will Casemiro be positioned perfectly to make the cynical tactical foul? Will they be patient enough to just pass the ball sideways and wait for a real opening?
It's going to be a tense, high-stakes chess match. But then, only 6 days later, they have to pivot their entire mentality. June 19th in Philadelphia. Brazil versus Haiti.
The contextual landscape of this match shifts dramatically. Haiti is the historic, emotional underdog of the group, qualifying for the World Cup for the first time since 1974.
So this is absolutely not a game about defensive discipline or surviving suffering. This is a game where Brazil is realistically going to hold 75, maybe 80% of the possession.
At a minimum. The tactical challenge in Philadelphia isn't just about securing the 3 points, it is a mathematical exercise. In tournament football, group stage tiebreakers often come down to goal difference.
Right, they need to run up the score.
Brazil's primary objective is to maximize their goal output to ensure they secure the top seed in the group, which ideally guarantees a more favorable draw in the knockout rounds.
So if you are heavily favored and you need to score 5 goals, how does Ancelotti manage the squad? You don't want to risk Vinícius pulling a hamstring against Haiti.
This is where his elite squad management and emotional intelligence shine. Expect heavy structural rotation. This match is vital for 2 distinct reasons. First, it allows Ancelotti to test alternative tactical combinations in a live environment, perhaps seeing how Fabinho operates alongside Guimarães in the midfield pivot.
And the second reason,
Second, and vastly more important, it is about blooding the youth.
getting the kids some tournament experience.
Precisely. Ancelotti will utilize this relatively low-pressure environment to give essential confidence-building World Cup minutes to young bench players like the winger Ragan or the physical striker Igor Thiago. It allows them to shake off their immense World Cup nerves, feel the grass beneath their feet, and score a goal without the crushing, suffocating pressure of playing against a defensive powerhouse.
That makes total sense. It keeps everyone involved.
It keeps the entire 26-man roster emotionally engaged and physically sharp.
Which is brilliant man management. Keep everyone happy. But they are going to need every ounce of that freshness because they wrap up the group stage on June 24th in Miami, Brazil versus Scotland. And based on the scouting reports, this is going to be an absolute street fight.
It is a complete stylistic whiplash from the intricate low block of Morocco and the possession dominance against Haiti. Scotland is making an incredibly emotional, fiercely proud return to the World Cup stage after a brutal 28-year absence. And they will be backed by a highly passionate, incredibly loud traveling fan base that will try to turn the Miami Stadium into Glasgow.
And from a tactical standpoint, Scotland does not care about low blocks, and they certainly do not care about having possession of the ball.
Not at all. They deploy a highly physical, intensely traditional British style of football. Their entire tactical system is predicated on intense pressing triggers, aggressive and heavy tackling, sheer relentless work rate, and absolute dominance in aerial duels and second balls.
Which, if we look at the history of Brazilian football, is the exact style of play they despise. They want rhythm, they want space to dance. They do not want to get kicked in the shins every time they touch the ball.
They historically abhor high-friction matches. The specific critical danger Scotland presents is through set-pieces corners and long looping free kicks launched directly into the penalty box.
So they just bypass the midfield entirely?
Yes. Scotland will actively try to bypass the technical midfield battle entirely. They have no interest in passing around Casemiro. They want to launch the ball forward, fight for the knockdown, and turn this match into an ugly, bruising brawl. They want to make it rain in Miami, metaphorically speaking, to disrupt Brazil's sunshine football.
So how on earth does a team built on flair counter that kind of British brute force?
This specific matchup illuminates exactly why Gabriel Magalhães from Arsenal and Bremer from Juventus were selected over more technically gifted, ball-playing center backs. Ancelotti will rely heavily on their immense physical presence, their raw aggression, and their specific ability to win those crucial, violent aerial battles in the penalty box to neutralize Scotland's long ball threats.
That's going to be ugly.
It will not be aesthetically pleasing. It won't be Jogo Bonito. But it is the necessary European pragmatism required for tournament survival.
It is staggering when you lay it all out. Just to get out of the group stage, Brazil has to outpatient a deeply structural Morocco, outscore an inspired Haiti, and outfight a bruising Scotland. It is a tactical gauntlet that demands 3 completely different footballing identities within a span of 11 days.
Which perfectly encapsulates why a pragmatic, adaptable chameleon like Carlo Ancelotti was hired to break the century-old taboo in the first place. A rigid ideologue would likely stumble against one of those distinct styles.
Which brings us right back to the core question that launched this entire deep dive for us. As we look at the totality of what we've discussed, the trauma of the 24-year curse, the tactical shifts, the tucked-in fullbacks, the management of Neymar and Endrick, we have to answer the debate. Does Carlo Ancelotti strengthen or undermine the national identity of Brazil?
Well, if we synthesize the evidence from the historical data and the tactical blueprints, the conclusion is that Ancelotti is attempting something entirely unprecedented. He isn't trying to erase the Brazilian identity. He's attempting a highly delicate surgical fusion of cultures.
Right.
He understands that he must preserve the explosive, terrifying, improvisational Brazilian DNA in the final third of the pitch. You cannot take the magic away from Vinícius or Neymar, but he is grafting onto that magical attack a hardened, cynical, deeply European defensive spine. He's trying to teach the most naturally gifted footballers on earth how to suffer so they can finally survive the European wall and win again.
He is essentially trying to give them the rigid discipline required to let their natural magic actually work in a knockout game. It is a brilliant, highly volatile experiment. But, spending an hour thinking through the implications of all this leaves me with one final, very provocative thought. For you listening right now, I want you to mull this over as you watch the tournament unfold.
What's that?
If Carlo Ancelotti actually succeeds, If this pragmatic, gum-chewing Italian manager is the one to finally cure the trauma and deliver Brazil's sacred, long-awaited sixth star in 2026, does this permanently change the entire landscape of global international football?
Oh, that's a huge question.
Think about the other fiercely proud, historic footballing nations that possess deep, insular domestic coaching traditions. Think about Argentina. Think about Germany. If Brazil, the proudest footballing nation on earth, proves that hiring a foreign tactical genius is the ultimate missing puzzle piece, will those nations suddenly abandon their own pride?
It could start a domino effect.
Will they start headhunting foreign managers too? Are we currently witnessing the exact historical moment where the entire concept of a national tactical identity is effectively erased forever, replaced by a globalized, borderless market of mercenary supercoaches?
It is a phenomenal question. It may well be the ultimate existential turning point for the future of international football.
It really is. The ripple effects could change the sport for the next century. We will just have to see how these massive cultural and tactical battles actually unfold on the pitch in North America in 2026 to find out. But until then, it brings us right back to where we started. That living, breathing constitution of Brazilian football, it is shifting, it is mutating. The faithful are gathered in the cathedral, holding their breath, waiting to see if this Italian architect can finally rebuild their altar. Thanks for joining us on this incredibly dense deep dive into the beautiful game. Keep questioning what you see on the pitch, and we'll catch you next time.